They thought she was just the silent wife at home. They thought she didn't know. Tonight, at New York's most exclusive gala, billionaire Alistair L. made the fatal mistake of parading his mistress in front of the world's elite, laughing at the woman he left behind. But he forgot one thing: a woman scorned doesn't just get mad. She gets even. And she doesn't come alone. When the ballroom doors opened, the silence was deafening. Madeline L. wasn't there to make a scene. She was there to end his career. And the man on her arm, he was Alistair's worst nightmare. This is the story of the ultimate revenge. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel smelled of old money, white truffles, and the distinctive metallic tang of ambition. It was the night of the Silver Horizon Gala, an event where a ticket cost more than most Americans made in a year, and the guest list was curated with the precision of a diamond cutter. Alistair L. adjusted his cuffs. They were bespoke mother of pearl, monogrammed with AS, gleaming under the chandelier light. At 52, Alistair was the picture of American corporate royalty. As the CEO of L Dynamics, a logistics empire that effectively controlled shipping routes from Shanghai to Seattle, he walked with the heavy, assured gait of a man who had never been told no without firing the person who said it. On his arm hung Tiffany Lacroix. She was 24, a former swimsuit model turned brand ambassador, though no one was quite sure what brand she represented other than her own. She was wearing a dress that was less of a garment and more of a suggestion, a crimson slip of silk that clung to her like a second skin, leaving very little to the imagination. It was a stark, intentional contrast to the conservative elegance usually expected at the Silver Horizon. "Alistair, darling," Tiffany purred, leaning into him as cameras flashed like lightning in a summer storm. "Everyone is looking at us. Let them look," Alistair said, a smirk playing on his lips. He took a sip of his scotch, aged 30 years darker than his conscience. "They're looking because they know power when they see it, and beauty." He squeezed her waist, a possessive gesture that screamed ownership. This was his debut with her. For months, the rumors had been whispers in the dark corners of Manhattan supper clubs. Alistair has a new girl. Madeline is out. The divorce papers are already drafted. Tonight, Alistair wasn't just confirming the rumors. He was broadcasting them. He had left his wife of 20 years, Madeline, at their estate in Greenwich, with nothing but the staff and her rose garden. He hadn't even told her he was bringing Tiffany. He simply assumed Madeline would do what she always did: stay quiet, maintain the facade of dignity, and fade into the background. "Mr. L, Mr. L." A reporter from the Post pushed forward, thrusting a microphone toward him. "Is it true that L Dynamics is looking to acquire the Omnitech Group next quarter? And is this the lovely lady we've been hearing so much about?" Alistair laughed, a booming, confident sound. "Business first, gentlemen. L Dynamics is always looking to expand. As for the lady," he looked down at Tiffany, who beamed. "Let's just say I'm entering a new chapter, a more vibrant chapter." The crowd rippled with whispers. "Can you believe he brought her here? Where is Madeline? Does she know? Look at that dress. It's scandalous." Alistair ignored them all. He spotted Roger Banks, the CFO of Goldman Sachs, and steered Tiffany toward him. This was his night. He was the king of the jungle, parading his prize. He felt invincible. He had the money, the youth on his arm, and the company. Madeline was a ghost of his past, a woman who wore beige cardigans and discussed literacy programs. She was boring. She was safe. And Alistair was done with safe. "Roger," Alistair boomed, clapping the banker on the back. "You look tired. Market got you down." Roger looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Tiffany, then back to Alistair. "Alistair, good to see you. Interesting company you're keeping tonight." "Tiffany, meet Roger," Alistair said, ignoring the tone. "Roger handles my money, so be nice to him." Tiffany giggled, extending a manicured hand. "Nice to meet you, Roger. Alistair talks about you all the time." Roger took the hand limply. "I'm sure. Alistair, have you spoken to Madeline today?" Alistair's smile tightened. "Why would I? She's likely in bed with a book. You know Madeline. She's not built for this world anymore, Roger. She's fragile." "Fragile?" Roger repeated, a strange look in his eyes. He looked over Alistair's shoulder toward the massive double doors at the entrance of the ballroom. "I wouldn't be so sure about that." Alistair frowned. "What are you talking about?" Suddenly, the ambient noise of the room shifted. It didn't stop, it changed. The low hum of conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses dropped a decibel, then another, until a hush swept across the room like a cold wind. The photographers near the red carpet entrance stopped shouting. The flashes stopped popping for a split second, only to erupt into a blinding frenzy 10 times more intense than when Alistair had arrived. Alistair turned, annoyed that someone was stealing his spotlight. "Who is it, the mayor? A Kardashian?" He looked toward the grand staircase. At the top of the stairs stood a woman. For a second, Alistair didn't recognize her. He squinted. The woman was tall, statuesque, wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that absorbed the light and shimmered like a starless sky. It was cut dangerously low in the back, elegant but commanding hugging curves that he hadn't noticed in years. Her hair, usually tied back in a sensible bun, cascaded in loose, glossy waves over one shoulder. She wore diamonds, not the modest studs he bought her for anniversaries, but a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that looked like it belonged in the crown jewels. It was Madeline. Alistair's mouth fell open. He actually dropped his hand from Tiffany's waist. Madeline L. stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at the crowd, not with fear, but with the imperious gaze of a queen surveying her subjects. Her chin was high. Her eyes, usually soft and yielding, were hard as flint. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the man whose arm she was holding. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, cut in a military, precise fade. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than Alistair's car, tailored to perfection. He had a scar above his left eyebrow that gave him a dangerous, rugged look, contrasting with the refined atmosphere. The room gasped audibly. "Is that?" Tiffany whispered, looking confused. "Who is that old guy?" Alistair felt the blood drain from his face. His knees went weak. "That?" Alistair whispered, his voice trembling for the first time in a decade. "That is Madeline Caldwell. Madeline Caldwell, the Wolf of Wall Street. The CEO of Caldwell & Co., the private equity firm that had been ruthlessly acquiring companies and stripping them for parts. He was Alistair's direct rival, a man Alistair had publicly insulted in Forbes magazine only 2 months ago, calling him a vulture with no vision. And now the vulture was walking down the stairs of the plaza with Alistair's wife. Madeline leaned in and whispered something to Madeline. Madeline threw his head back and laughed, a rich, deep sound that carried across the silent room. He patted Madeline's hand affectionately, a gesture so intimate, so comfortable, it suggested they weren't just acquaintances. It suggested they were partners. Alistair felt a surge of nausea. He stepped forward instinctively, fueled by a toxic mix of jealousy and confusion. "What is she doing?" he hissed. "Alistair, wait," Roger Banks warned, grabbing his elbow. "Don't make a scene, not with Caldwell. Alistair shook him off. "That's my wife." He marched toward the bottom of the stairs, dragging a confused Tiffany behind him. He had to reassert dominance. He had to remind Madeline of her place. She was his wife. She belonged in Greenwich, waiting for him to come home, not on the arm of his enemy. As Madeline and Madeline reached the bottom of the stairs, the sea of people parted for them. They stopped directly in front of Alistair. The air crackled with tension. Madeline looked at Alistair. Her gaze flickered to Tiffany, taking in the red dress, the desperate grip on Alistair's arm. Madeline didn't scowl. She didn't cry. She smiled. "Good evening, Alistair," Madeline said. Her voice was smooth like liquid chocolate. "I see you brought a guest." Alistair barked, ignoring the pleasantry. "What the hell is this? What are you doing here? And with him?" He jabbed a finger toward Madeline. Madeline Caldwell caught Alistair's finger, pushing it down gently but with undeniable strength. "Careful with the finger pointing L," Madeline said, his voice a low rumble. "It's rude to point at the new majority shareholder." Alistair froze. "What?" Madeline stepped closer. Her perfume, a scent of jasmine and oud that was entirely new, filling Alistair's senses. "You didn't check the mail this morning before you left for the city? Did you, Alistair?" she asked innocently. "I don't check the mail, the maid does," Alistair snapped. "What are you talking about?" "The board meeting notifications," Madeline said, her eyes dancing with cold amusement. "And the transfer of assets. You see, darling, when you put the Greenwich estate, the Hamptons house, and 40% of your non-voting stock in my name for tax purposes 5 years ago, you forgot one small detail in the bylaws." Alistair's heart hammered against his ribs. "Those are non-voting stocks. You have no power." "Actually," Madeline interjected, checking his vintage Patek Philippe watch. "They were non-voting, until they were combined with a voting block of 15%, which I just purchased from your disgruntled brother Samuel this afternoon." Alistair staggered back. Samuel hates you." "He hates you more, Alistair," Madeline grinned, "especially after you cut his pension last Christmas." Madeline smoothed the lapel of Madeline's tuxedo. "So when you combine my 40% with Madeline's 15%, that makes 55%. She looked Alistair dead in the eye. "We own the company, Alistair." The camera flashes went blinding white. Tiffany looked between them, realizing the ship was sinking. You can't do this," Alistair stammered. "I'm the CEO. I built this. You built it on my father's connections and my patience," Madeline said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "And tonight I'm taking it back. Enjoy the gala, Alistair. It's your retirement party." Madeline linked arms with Madeline. "Shall we, Dom?" "I believe the champagne is better near the orchestra." "After you, Maddie," Madeline said. They walked past him. Alistair stood frozen, the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. The whispers were no longer about his girlfriend's dress. They were about his demise. "Alistair." Tiffany tugged on his arm. "What does majority shareholder mean? Does that mean we're still rich?" Alistair looked at her, then back at Madeline's retreating figure. He realized with a sinking horror that the game had just begun, and he was already losing. The immediate aftermath of Madeline's revelation was less of a ripple and more of a tsunami. As Madeline and Madeline walked away, the vacuum of silence they left behind was instantly filled with the frantic murmuring of New York's elite. Alistair stood rooted to the spot, his face a mottled canvas of red rage and pale shock. He felt the phantom vibration of his phone in his pocket, likely his PR team, his lawyers and his brother Samuel, all calling to either scream at him or laugh at him. "Alistair," Tiffany whined, tugging at his sleeve again. The silk of her dress felt cheap against his skin now. "People are staring. Can we go? I want to go to the after-party at One Oak." Alistair whipped around, his eyes wild. "The after-party? Are you insane? Do you understand what just happened?" She said something about stocks. Tiffany shrugged, checking her reflection in the back of a spoon held by a passing waiter. "It sounds boring. You're the CEO. Just fire her." "Fire her?" Alistair let out a strangled laugh that sounded terrifyingly close to a sob. "She owns the majority share, Tiffany. She can fire me." He looked around for an ally. Roger Banks had vanished. The reporters who had been fawning over him 5 minutes ago were now swarming toward the bar where Madeline and Madeline were holding court. Alistair was yesterday's news, and the ink wasn't even dry yet. "Come on," Alistair growled, gripping Tiffany's elbow tight enough to bruise. "We're not leaving. If I leave, I look guilty. I look weak. We're going to fix this." He dragged her toward the VIP section, a raised platform cordoned off by velvet ropes. This was where the real power brokers sat. Usually Alistair held the center table. Tonight, that table was occupied by his wife and his nemesis. As Alistair approached, a burly security guard, one Alistair had employed for 3 years, stepped in front of him. "Mr. L," the guard said, his voice flat. "I can't let you in." Alistair blinked. "Excuse me, I pay your salary, Griggs." "Actually, sir," Griggs said, not making eye contact, "payroll comes through L Dynamics corporate accounts, which are currently under an audit freeze as of 8:00 p.m. tonight. Mr. Caldwell is covering the security detail for the evening." Alistair felt a vein in his forehead throb. "Get out of my way, Griggs, or you'll never work in this city again." From the table behind the ropes, Madeline's voice floated out, smooth and mocking. "Let him in, Griggs. I want to hear what he has to say." Griggs stepped aside. Alistair stormed up the short steps, Tiffany trailing behind him, looking increasingly anxious as she realized the gravity of the situation. Madeline was seated on a plush velvet sofa, a glass of vintage Dom Perignon in her hand. She looked relaxed, regal, and utterly unbothered. Madeline sat on the arm of the sofa, a protective physical barrier between Madeline and Alistair. "You have some nerve," Alistair spat, looming over them. "Humiliating me in public, bringing him." "I learned from the best, Alistair," Madeline said, taking a slow sip of champagne. "You brought her?" She gestured loosely to Tiffany with her glass. "You paraded your mistress in front of the press to humiliated me. I simply balanced the equation." "This is business," Alistair shouted, ignoring the hushed gasps from nearby tables. "You involved my company. That is my legacy." "Madeline, my father's legacy." "Your father," Madeline corrected sharply, her eyes flashing fire. "Loved me like a daughter. He told me before he died that you had a reckless streak. He told me to watch the shop if you ever lost your way." She set the glass down with a definitive clink. "Parading a 20-year-old Instagram model while neglecting the merger with Omnitech. I'd say you're lost, Alistair." "I was handling the merger. You were handling Tiffany." Madeline cut in his voice, icy. "I reviewed the deal memos, L. You were about to overpay by nearly $300 million because you were too busy vacationing in Saint-Tropez to read the due diligence reports. Madeline saved the company a fortune by blocking the deal this morning." Alistair froze. "You blocked the Omni deal?" "We blocked it," Madeline confirmed, "and opened negotiations with their competitor, creating a vertical monopoly that actually makes sense. The board loved the proposal. Samuel loved it. "Samuel is a traitor," Alistair hissed. "I'll sue you, both of you. Collusion. Hostile takeover. I'll tie you up in court for decades." Madeline sighed, a sound of profound boredom. She reached into her clutch, a small, glittering Judith Leiber bag, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I thought you might say that. Do you recognize this Alistair?" She unfolded a photocopy of a document. Alistair squinted at it. It was a prenup amendment. That's the post-nuptial agreement we signed 10 years ago," Alistair said. "When you caught me with the secretary, it protects my assets. Read paragraph 4, subsection C," Madeline said softly. "The public decency and moral turpitude clause. You insisted on it, remember. You were worried I would embarrass you if I ever started drinking like your mother." Alistair's face went grey. He remembered. He had been so arrogant, so sure of his control over her, that he had his lawyers draft a clause stating that if either party caused significant public scandal or reputational damage to the L name, the other party was entitled to an immediate triggering of asset division favoring the injured party. "Bringing a mistress to the Silver Horizon Gala," Madeline said, gesturing to the room full of reporters, "while still legally married, constitutes significant public scandal. You triggered the clause, Alistair. Tonight, you handed me everything on a silver platter." Tiffany, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. "Wait, does that mean he doesn't have the money anymore?" The table went silent. Madeline looked at Tiffany with a mixture of pity and amusement. "Honey," Madeline said, her voice dropping the hardness for a brief second. "He has money, but he doesn't have the jet. He doesn't have the Hamptons house. And as of tomorrow morning, I doubt he'll have the CEO title. He's just a millionaire now, not a billionaire." Tiffany looked at Alistair. The calculation in her eyes was transparent. She was doing the math. "Alistair," Tiffany said, her voice shrill, "you told me you were the king of New York." "I am," Alistair roared, turning on her. "Shut up, Tiffany." "Don't speak to her like that," Madeline said, standing up. He towered over Alistair. "The girl made a mistake trusting you. We've all made that mistake." Alistair looked between them. He felt the walls closing in. He needed to get out. He needed to call his shark of a lawyer Harvey Specter types who could fix anything. "This isn't over," Alistair snarled, pointing a shaking finger at Madeline. "You think you can run a logistics empire? You haven't worked a day in 20 years. You just arrange flowers and host charity teas. You'll run L Dynamics into the ground in a month." Madeline stood up then. She was wearing heels, but she seemed to grow 3 inches purely on willpower. She stepped close to Alistair, invading his personal space. "You think I haven't worked?" she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Who do you think proofread your speeches, Alistair, who charmed the Chinese delegation when you were too drunk to finish dinner in Shanghai? Who advised you to buy the lithium mines in Nevada before the EV boom? You called it pillow talk. I called it consulting." She poked him in the chest. "I didn't just arrange flowers. I arranged your life. And now I'm rearranging it." She turned to Madeline. "I'm tired of this scenery. Take me to dinner somewhere with better company." "Absolutely," Madeline said. He offered her his arm. They walked past Alistair, leaving him standing in the VIP section with a stunned mistress and a security guard who wouldn't look him in the eye. "Alistair," Tiffany said, pulling out her phone. "My Uber is 5 minutes away." "Uber?" Alistair blinked. "We have the limo." "You heard the guard?" Tiffany said, her voice cold. "The account is frozen, And honestly, this is way too much drama for me. I have a brand to protect." She turned on her heel and walked away, the red dress flowing behind her like a warning flag. Alistair stood alone. For the first time in his life, the room wasn't looking at him with envy. They were looking at him with the one thing he couldn't handle: pity. He stormed towards the exit, needing air. He pushed through the heavy revolving doors onto Fifth Avenue. The cool night air hit his face, but it didn't cool his temper. He saw his car, the black Maybach 62S, idling at the curb. His driver, Stevens, was behind the wheel. "Thank God," Alistair muttered. He marched up to the car and grabbed the handle. It was locked. He knocked on the glass. "Stevens, open the door." The window rolled down 2 inches. Stevens, a man who had driven Alistair for 12 years, looked uncomfortable. "I can't, Mr. L." "What do you mean you can't open the damn door?" "I just got a call from dispatch, sir. The vehicle has been recalled to the corporate garage. New policy from the chairman of the board." "I am the chairman." "Not anymore, sir. The memo says the new chairman is Mrs. Madeline L. Caldwell." Alistair kicked the tire, scuffing his Italian leather shoes. "She can't change her name that fast. That's illegal." "I'm just following orders, sir. I have to go. They're tracking the GPS." Stevens rolled up the window. The Maybach pulled away, merging into the yellow river of taxis, leaving Alistair standing on the curb. It started to rain. Alistair L., the titan of logistics, stood on the sidewalk in a tuxedo, getting soaked while tourists gawked at him. He reached for his phone to call an Uber, only to realize he had never installed the app. He didn't know how. He had people for that. As the rain plastered his hair to his forehead, a black SUV pulled up slowly. The window lowered. It wasn't Madeline. It was a man Alistair hadn't seen in years. It was Victor Cray, the ruthless investigative journalist whose career Alistair had ruined 5 years ago with a frivolous lawsuit. Victor held up a camera and snapped a picture of Alistair, wet and miserable. "Rough night, Alistair." Victor grinned, his teeth yellow and predatory. "Going to make a great cover for Vanity Fair next month. The Fall of the House of L. I've already got the headline." "Get away from me," Alistair warned. "Oh, I'm not here to harass you," Victor said. "I'm here to give you a heads up. Madeline didn't just give me the scoop on the company takeover. She gave me the ledger." Alistair felt his stomach drop through the pavement. "What ledger?" "The one from the Cayman Islands," Victor said, his eyes gleaming. "The one documenting the bribes to the port authorities in Panama, the one you thought you deleted." Victor rolled up his window. "Better call a criminal defense lawyer, Alistair. The divorce is the least of your problems." The SUV drove off. Alistair stood in the rain, shaking. It wasn't the cold. It was the realization that Madeline hadn't just planned a divorce. She had planned an execution. While Alistair was shivering on the wet pavement of Fifth Avenue, Madeline sat in the back of a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom, gliding silently through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan. The chaos of the gala felt miles away, replaced by the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the windshield wipers. Madeline leaned her head back against the leather seat, closing her eyes. For the first time all night, her shoulders dropped. "You were perfect," Madeline said softly. He reached over and took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, the anchor she had needed for the past 2 years. "I felt sick," Madeline admitted, opening her eyes. She turned to look at him. Seeing him, seeing the way he looked at that girl. It wasn't even jealousy, Dom. It was embarrassment. How did I stay with him for 20 years? How was I that blind? You weren't blind, Maddie. You were loyal, Madeline corrected. There's a difference. Alistair took a woman of substance and tried to turn her into a shadow. He just didn't realize that shadows grow longer when the sun goes down. Madeline smiled faintly. That sounds like a line from one of your shareholder letters. I've been practicing, Madeline grinned. His expression then turned serious. Are you sure about the next step? Once Victor publishes that story about the Panama bribes, there's no going back. Alistair could face federal prison time. L-Dynamics stock will tank before we can rebuild it. Let it tank, Madeline said, her voice hardening. I'd rather rule over the ashes than serve in his palace. Besides, we have the capital to buy back the stock at the floor price. We'll rebuild it the right way. No bribes, no bullying. She looked out the window at the passing city lights. How long do you think it will take him to figure out the safe? Madeline checked his watch. If he's as panicked as I think he is, he's probably breaking the speed limit to get to the Midtown office right now. Madeline was right. Alistair had managed to flag down a taxi by practically throwing himself in front of it. He was soaked, his tuxedo ruined, looking less like a billionaire and more like a crazed wedding guest. El Tower, Alistair barked at the driver. And step on it. Traffic is bad, buddy, the driver muttered. I don't care, drive on the sidewalk if you have to. Alistair's mind was racing. The ledger. Victor Cray knew about the Panama ledger. That black book contained the handwritten records of every illicit payment Alistair had authorized to bypass customs in the colon-free zone. If the DOJ saw that it wasn't just a fine, it was 10 to 20 years for violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. He had kept it in the wall safe in his private office on the 40th floor, a biometric safe. Only he had the fingerprint. Only he had the retinal scan. Madeline couldn't have accessed it. It was impossible. She was bluffing. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the looming glass monolith of L Tower. Alistair threw a wad of wet cash at the driver and sprinted for the revolving doors. The night security guard, a young man named Kevin, looked up in surprise as Alistair burst in. Mr. Elsa, are you okay? It's late. Disable the elevators, Alistair shouted, storming past the desk. I don't want anyone coming up. No one... He slammed his hand on the elevator call button. The ride up to the 41st floor felt like an eternity. He paced the small metal box, muttering to himself. She's bluffing. She has to be. She doesn't know the code. She doesn't have my eyes. The doors pinged open. The executive floor was dark, silent, and ghostly. Alistair ran down the hallway to his corner office. He fumbled with his keys, unlocked the heavy oak door, and slammed it shut behind him. He didn't turn on the lights. The ambient glow of the city outside was enough. He went straight to the large, abstract painting behind his desk, a pretentious piece he'd paid $500,000 for, and swung it open. The steel face of the safe gleamed in the shadows. Alistair pressed his thumb against the scanner. Beep. He leaned in for the retinal scan. Beep. Authorized. The heavy locking mechanism clanked, and the door hissed open. Alistair reached inside his hand, trembling. He felt around for the leather-bound book. His hand met empty air. No, he whispered. He frantically patted the interior of the safe. He pulled out his phone and used the flashlight, illuminating the steel box. It was empty. Wait. Not empty. In the very back, where the ledger used to be, sat a single small object. A tube of lipstick, Chanel Rouge shade 44. Madeline's shade. And beneath it, a folded note card on heavy cream-colored stock. Alistair snatched the card, tearing it open. The handwriting was elegant looping script. Madeline's script. Alistair. You always said I had a good eye for detail. Did you know you talk in your sleep when you've had too much scotch? You recited the backup combination code 3 years ago, 040799. Our wedding date. How sentimental. I took the liberty of moving the ledger to a secure location. Don't worry, the FBI will take good care of it. M. Alistair stared at the note, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. April 7th, 1999. April 7th, 1999. The day they were married. He had set it as the fail-safe code in case the biometrics failed, thinking it was romantic at the time. He hadn't changed it in 20 years. He screamed a raw, primal sound of fury and swept everything off his desk. The crystal lamp, the laptop, the framed photos of himself. They crashed to the floor, shattering. He was exposed. Completely and utterly exposed. His phone rang. It was lying on the floor amidst the broken glass. He picked it up. Caller ID Samuel Eller. Alistair answered. Samuel, you traitorous little... Save it, Alistair. His brother's voice was calm, almost cheerful. I just wanted to make sure you were awake. You have a board meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Mandatory attendance. If you're not there, we vote in absentia. You can't do this, Sam. We're blood. Blood. Samuel laughed darkly. You fired my son last year because you said he lacked the killer instinct. You cut my dividends to fund your mistress's jewelry habit. The only blood involved here, Alistair, is the blood in the water. And the sharks are hungry. The line went dead. Alistair dropped the phone. He sank into his leather chair, the same chair he had sat in, like a king for a decade. Now it felt like an electric chair waiting to be switched on. He looked at the lipstick on the desk. You want a war, Madeline? He whispered to the empty room. I'll give you a war. If I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me. The conference room at L Dynamics was a masterpiece of intimidation. A 40-foot table made of reclaimed mahogany, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park and air conditioning, set to a crisp 68 degrees to keep everyone awake and on edge. At 7:55 a.m., the room was full. The board of directors sat in silence. Usually before a meeting, there was chatter about golf scores or vacation homes. Today, the atmosphere was funereal. Madeline sat at the far end of the table, opposite the chairman's seat. She wore a white power suit, sharp, tailored, and pristine. It was a visual statement. She was the cleansing fire. Madeline sat to her right, his laptop open, reviewing live stock tickers. Samuel L. Alistair's younger brother sat to her left. He looked nervous, but resolved. At 8 o'clock a.m. sharp, the double doors swung open. Alistair strode in. He had managed to clean himself up. He was wearing a fresh charcoal suit. His hair was slicked back, and he had practiced his unbothered face in the mirror for an hour. But his eyes were bloodshot, and there was a tremor in his hands he couldn't quite hide. He walked straight to the head of the table, the chairman's seat. "Good morning," Alistair said, his voice booming. "I see everyone is early. Good. We have a crisis to manage. The stock is down 4% in pre-market trading due to some unfortunate rumors." He reached for the chair to pull it out. "Alistair," a voice cut through the room. It was Beatrice Thorne, the oldest member of the board, and usually Alistair's staunchest defender. She didn't look up from her iPad. "That seat is for the chairman." Alistair paused, hand on the leather backrest. "I am the chairman, Beatrice." Not as of the emergency resolution passed at 7:30 a.m. this morning. Beatrice said coldly. "We convened early. You were removed for cause." Alistair froze. "Removed? You can't remove me without a hearing." "Clause 12. Samuel piped up, finally looking his brother in the eye. "Gross negligence and moral turpitude." The legal team reviewed the footage from the gala, and the documents Madeline provided regarding the Panama accounts. "Those documents are forged," Alistair shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "This is a coup. It's a hostile takeover orchestrated by my vindictive ex-wife and her lover." He pointed a shaking finger at Madeline. "He's a vulture. He'll strip this company and sell it for scrap." Madeline stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. "Actually, Alistair," Madeline said calmly, "my firm Caldwell & Co. isn't buying L Dynamics to strip it. We're taking it private. We're recapitalizing. And the first order of business is cleaning house." Madeline tossed a file folder down the long table. It slid perfectly across the mahogany, stopping inches from Alistair's hand. "That is your severance package. It's modest. Given the pending DOJ investigation, the board felt a golden parachute was inappropriate. We're calling it a tin parachute." Alistair opened the folder. He scanned the numbers. His face went purple. "This is nothing. This is peanuts. I have stock options." "Unvested options are forfeited upon termination for cause," Madeline said. She hadn't looked at him until now. Her gaze was steady, unblinking. "You wrote that rule yourself, Alistair, 3 years ago, to avoid paying the former CFO when you fired him for disloyalty." Alistair looked around the room. 12 faces. 12 people he had dined with, enriched and bullied for years. Not one of them would meet his eyes. They were sharks, and they smelled the blood he was leaking. "You're all making a mistake," Alistair snarled. "You think she can run this? She's a housewife." "She's the majority shareholder," Beatrice Thorne said. "And she has Mr. Caldwell. And unlike you, Alistair, she didn't embarrass us on national television." 2 security guards entered the room. It wasn't Griggs this time. It was 2 men Alistair didn't recognize, huge, silent professionals. "Mr. L," one of them said, "please hand over your access badge and company phone. We will escort you to the exit." "I'm not leaving," Alistair said, gripping the back of the chair. "I built this tower, and now you're trespassing in it," Madeline said. "Don't make them drag you out, Alistair. Have some dignity left, for the sake of the name." Alistair looked at Madeline. He wanted to see triumph in her eyes. He wanted to see gloating. But he saw nothing. Just a blank, indifferent wall. That hurt more than the anger. She didn't hate him anymore. She simply didn't care. Alistair reached into his pocket, pulled out his badge, and threw it on the table. It clattered loudly. "You'll hear from my lawyers," Alistair spat. "I imagine we'll be hearing from your bail bondsman first," Madeline replied softly. Alistair turned and marched out the security guards, flanking him close. As the doors closed behind him, he heard something that cut him to the bone. He heard the board meeting continue. "Item 2. Madeline's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "The restructuring of the Shanghai logistics hub." They had already moved on. He was gone, and the world hadn't stopped. 3 days later. Alistair L. sat in a booth at a diner in Queens. It was a place with sticky tables and coffee that tasted like battery acid. He wore a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses despite the overcast weather. His credit cards were frozen. His bank accounts were under investigation review. He was currently living off a stash of emergency cash he kept in a gym bag about $50,000. It was a lot for a normal person. For Alistair, it was a week's expenses. He wasn't done. He refused to be done. Across from him sat a man who looked like he was made of beef jerky and bad decisions. His name was Gareth, a private investigator who had been disbarred years ago for wiretapping a senator. "You look like hell, Elle." Gareth grunted, stirring his coffee with a knife. "I didn't hire you for fashion advice," Alistair snapped. "Did you get it?" Gareth slid a USB drive across the table. "It wasn't easy. Caldwell & Co. has cybersecurity that makes the Pentagon look like a public library. But everyone has a weak spot. And Madeleine Caldwell's weak spot isn't money, it's his past." Gareth leaned in. 10 years ago, before he started his firm, there was an incident in Chicago. A harassment claim. It was settled out of court, sealed tight. But I found the woman. Alistair's eyes lit up. "Can we get her to talk?" "No, she's dead. Car accident 3 years ago." Alistair slammed his fist on the table. "Then what good is this? Because—" Gareth smiled, showing a gold tooth. "The settlement money came from a shell company. I traced the shell company. It's linked to an account that was used for, let's call it, market manipulation. Insider trading." Alistair grabbed the USB drive. "Proof of insider trading's circumstantial, but enough to trigger an SEC investigation if it lands on the right desk. If Caldwell is under investigation for securities fraud, the acquisition of your company pauses. The board will panic. They might beg you to come back to stabilize the ship." "I need more than circumstantial," Alistair muttered. He stared at the ketchup bottle, his mind twisting into dark corners. "There is another option," Gareth said, lowering his voice. "But it costs extra, and it's messy." "I don't care about messy. I have a contact, a hacker. We don't just find evidence, Alistair. We create it. We can plant a digital trail on Caldwell's server. Make it look like he was stealing corporate data from L Dynamics before the merger. Corporate espionage. That invalidates the deal immediately. Madeleine would look like a fool for partnering with a spy. She'd be forced to step down." Alistair sat back. Planting evidence was a felony. If he got caught, he wouldn't just lose his company. He'd lose his freedom forever. But then he remembered the look on Madeleine's face in the boardroom. The indifference. The way she had discarded him like a used napkin. "Do it," Alistair said. "How much? 50 grand. Cash, up front." Alistair hesitated. That was every cent he had left in the bag. "Do it," Alistair repeated. He kicked the gym bag under the table toward Gareth. "Just make sure it sticks." Meanwhile, at the Elle estate in Greenwich, Madeleine was walking through her rose garden. It was the one place she had felt peace during her marriage, mostly because Alistair hated the outdoors and never bothered her there. Madeleine was walking beside her. He had shed the suit for a cashmere sweater and jeans. He looked younger, lighter. "The transition team says the employees are relieved," Madeleine said. "Apparently productivity is up 20%, just because people aren't terrified of being screamed at in the hallways." "It's amazing what treating people like humans can do," Madeleine mused. She stopped to prune a wilting bloom from a white rosebush. "Madeleine, I've been thinking about Tiffany, the mistress. Why?" "Because she's been calling the office, trying to reach Alistair. Apparently the landlord of the apartment he rented for her is evicting her. He's stopped paying the rent." "Not our problem, Maddie." "I know, but Alistair is desperate. I know him. When he's cornered, he doesn't surrender. He lashes out. And he uses people." Madeleine turned to Madeleine, her expression worried. He'll try to use her, or he'll try to use you. Madeline chuckled. Let him try. My hands are clean. Are they? Madeline asked gently. Dom, you've been aggressive in business. You've made enemies. Is there anything at all, that Alistair could dig up? Madeline hesitated for a fraction of a second. Nothing that isn't buried under 10 layers of concrete. Madeline's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. She answered. Hello. Mrs. L. A female voice, shaky and tearful. This is Madeline. It's Tiffany. Tiffany Lacroix. Madeline stiffened. Madeline watched her closely. What do you want, Tiffany? I didn't know who else to call. Alistair just called me. He sounded crazy, Madeline. He was talking about hackers, about planting files on Madeline's computer. He wanted me to go to the press and say Madeline touched me. Madeline gasped. He what? He said if I did it, he'd give me $1 million when he got the company back. But I can't do that. I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a criminal. And he scared me. He's coming over to my place now to coach me on what to say. Please, I don't know what to do. Madeline's eyes met Madeline's. Where are you, Tiffany? I'm at the apartment in Soho. Lock the door, Madeline commanded. Do not let him in. We are on our way. She hung up and looked at Madeline. He's gone too far, Madeline said, her voice trembling with adrenaline. He's trying to frame you for assault and corporate espionage. He's going to Tiffany's right now. Madeline's face went dark. Then let's go. But we're not going alone. Who are we bringing? Madeline pulled out his phone. Victor Cray. If Alistair wants to write a story, let's make sure the press is there to see the ending. The loft apartment in Soho was minimal and cold, filled with rented furniture that looked expensive but felt hollow, much like the life Alistair had built for Tiffany. Outside, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour, hammering against the large industrial windows. Inside, Tiffany sat on the edge of the beige sofa, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. Her knuckles were white. A heavy pounding echoed from the metal door. Tiffany, open up. I know you're in there. Alistair's voice was muffled, but unmistakable. Tiffany looked toward the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. She took a shaky breath, stood up, and unlocked the front door. Alistair burst in like a gust of wind. He was soaked to the bone. His expensive jacket ruined his eyes, darting around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped animal. He locked the door behind him immediately. Why didn't you answer my calls? He demanded, pacing the room. He didn't even look at her. He was looking at the windows, checking for blinds. I was in the shower. Tiffany lied, her voice trembling. Alistair, you're scaring me. You look unwell. I'm fine, Alistair snapped. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip painful. I'm going to be better than fine. We're going to be back on top, Tiff. But I need you to focus. Did you read the script I texted you? The script for the interview. Alistair released her and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. I have Gareth setting up a meeting with TMZ tomorrow morning. You're going to go on camera. You're going to cry. Can you cry on command? Of course you can. You're an actress. I'm a model, Alistair. Same thing. He waved his hand dismissively. You're going to say that Madeline Caldwell cornered you at the gala, that he made inappropriate advances, that he threatened your career if you didn't sleep with him. Tiffany took a step back. But that's a lie. He didn't even speak to me. He was actually kind. Who cares if it's a lie? Alistair hissed, stepping closer. It's leverage. Once the accusation is out, The board will have to suspend him pending an investigation. The stock will plummet. I'll swoop in as the savior to stabilize the company. I'll get my chair back. And you—" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll get the penthouse. The real one. Park Avenue." "And if I don't?" Tiffany asked quietly. Alistair's face hardened. The charm evaporated, leaving only the ugliness of a desperate man. "If you don't," he whispered, "then you're on the street. I'll make sure you never book a job in this city again. I'll tell everyone you were the one who leaked the company secrets. I'll ruin you, Tiffany. I made you, and I can break you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Here. 10,000 cash, a down payment. Do the interview, and you get another $1 million when I'm reinstated." He shoved the envelope into her hands. "Take it." Tiffany looked at the money, then at Alistair. She took a deep breath, her eyes suddenly steeling. "No," she said. She dropped the envelope on the floor. Alistair stared at it. "What did you say, Hall?" "I said no." "I'm not doing it, Alistair. I'm not going to prison for you." Alistair raised his hand, his face twisting into a snarl. "You ungrateful little. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Alistair." The voice came from the bedroom. Alistair spun around. His jaw dropped. Madeline Caldwell leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, looking calm and dangerous. Behind him, Madeline stepped out, holding a phone that was clearly recording. And behind her, stepping out from the bathroom, was Victor Cray, the journalist holding a professional video camera with the red recording light blinking steadily. "Smile, Alistair." Victor grinned. "This is going live." Alistair stumbled back, tripping over the envelope of cash. What is this setup? It's an intervention," Madeline said, her voice cool. "Tiffany called us. She told us everything." "She's lying," Alistair shouted, pointing at Tiffany. "She's crazy. She tried to blackmail me." "Save it," Madeline said, walking into the center of the room. He picked up the envelope Alistair had dropped. He opened it and fanned the cash. Attempted subornation of perjury, blackmail. And since this money likely came from your emergency stash, which you didn't declare to the IRS, tax evasion. You can't prove anything, Alistair stammered, backing toward the door. "This is private property. You're trespassing. I'll sue you all." "Actually," Victor Cray said, lowering his camera slightly, "you just confessed to a felony on tape, and since Tiffany invited us here, we aren't trespassing. But the police waiting in the hallway, they might have a few questions." Alistair froze. "Police," as if on cue, there was a sharp knock at the door. "NYPD, open up." Alistair looked at Madeline. For the first time, the arrogance was completely gone. He looked small. He looked old. "Maddie," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Please, don't let them take me. I'm your husband. We were married for 20 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" Madeline looked at him, really looked at him one last time. She remembered the years of neglect, the gaslighting, the humiliation at the gala, and finally his willingness to destroy an innocent young woman just to save his own ego. "It meant everything to me, Alistair," she said softly. "That's why this has to happen. You need to learn that you can't buy your way out of consequences." She walked over to the door and opened it. 2 officers stepped in, followed by a detective. "Alistair L?" the detective asked. Alistair slumped against the wall. He didn't fight as they cuffed him. He just stared at the floor, the sound of the handcuffs clicking shut, signaling the end of his empire. As they led him out, he passed Tiffany. She didn't look away. She held her head high. "I hope it was worth it, Alistair," she whispered. The door closed, leaving the four of them in the silence of the loft. "Got it all," Victor said, patting his camera. "This is going to be the lead story on the 6 o'clock news. Billionaire busted the fall of Elle." "Thank you, Victor," Madeline said. She turned to Tiffany. Tiffany looked terrified. Am I in trouble?" Madeline stepped forward, and to Tiffany's shock, hugged her. It wasn't a stiff social hug. It was warm and maternal. "You were brave," Madeline said. "You did the right thing, and I promise you Alistair won't hurt you again." "But I have nothing," Tiffany sobbed, the adrenaline finally crashing. "He was right. I have no money. I have no job." "You have a clean slate," Madeline said kindly. "And we have a scholarship fund at the Elle Foundation for women seeking new careers. If you want to go to college or learn a trade, it's yours." Tiffany looked at them, tears streaming down her face. "Why, I helped him humiliate you." "Because," Madeline smiled, taking Madeline's hand, "living well is the best revenge, and helping others live well is even better." The headline in the Wall Street Journal declared Elle Dynamics reaches record high under new leadership. Beneath it, a photograph showed Madeline Elle and Madeline Caldwell ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, calm, confident, unstoppable. Alistair Elle never saw it. He sat in the quiet library of Otis Bantam Correctional Center, waiting for his sentencing. His empire was gone, his fortune seized, his future reduced to plea negotiations and regret. New York had already forgotten him. What was once a scandal was now just a case study. High above the city, sunlight filled the boardroom of Elle Tower. Blueprints and reports covered the table. At its head sat Madeline, composed and attentive. "Q3 profits are up 15%, Samuel announced. The merger cut delivery times in half. Employee profit sharing is approved, Madeline added. Morale is at an all-time high. The meeting ended early laughter following the departing board members. Madeline lingered by the window. "I wasted years making myself smaller," she said quietly. "Now I finally feel awake." "You were always strong," Madeline replied. "You just needed space." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a key to a villa in Tuscany. "For when you're ready to rest," he said. She smiled. "Let's go soon. Commercial flight." Outside, autumn light washed over the city. Nearby, Tiffany hurried past with law textbooks in her arms, focused and determined. Madeline and Madeline stepped into the street together, not as survivors of a scandal, but as partners building something new. They didn't look back. Alistair Elle learned the hard way that you can have all the money in the world, but if you bankrupt your character, you leave with nothing. Madeline showed us that true power isn't about how loud you can shout, but about how long you can wait and how hard you can fight when the time is right. She didn't just take back her life. She rebuilt it stronger than before. And in the end, the best revenge wasn't seeing Alistair in handcuffs. It was seeing herself happy. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and redemption, please hit that like button. It helps us create more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a drama. And tell me in the comments, do you think Alistair deserved 8 years, or should it have been longer? I'll see you in the next video.